It's ridiculous to try to introduce Bill McKibben. It's sort of a fruitless exercise because it's not possible to say enough about Bill McKibben, so let me just say a few things. Bill McKibben is well known. His 1989 book, The End of Nature, is regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change, and it's appeared in 24 languages. He's gone on to write 20 books, and his work appears regularly in periodicals from The New Yorker to Rolling Stone. He serves as the Schumann Distinguished Scholar in Environmental Studies here at Middlebury and as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He has won the Gandhi Peace Prize, as well as honorary degrees from 20 colleges and universities. He was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel, by the Swedish Parliament. Foreign Policy named him to its inaugural list of the world's 100 most important global thinkers. Bill helped found 350.org with a number of Middlebury undergraduates and will be celebrating the Sunday Night Environmental Group in just a couple of weeks, the 20th anniversary of SNEG. It became the first global grassroots climate campaign, and it's organized protests on every continent, including Antarctica, for climate change. Bill has played a leading role in launching the opposition to big oil pipeline projects like Keystone XL and the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which has become the biggest anti-corporate campaign in history, with endowments worth more than $40 trillion stepping back from oil, gas, and coal. More recently, he founded Third Act, which has organized more than 100,000 older Americans, people my age, to protect our climate and our democracy. It's an honor to be a colleague with Bill McKibben. And Bill, over to you.
Brother, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you above all for coming to join us here. We welcome you with open arms on this great weekend. And as our resident weather apologist, I can assure you that we have scheduled abundant sun for the big day on Sunday. And let me just say how moved I've been by listening to the last two panels and just being reminded of how much good thinking there is going on all the time here, and what big and open hearts. Look, our joy here today is, of course, shadowed by events on campus, shadowed by events in our nation and on our planet. And serious people understand, I think, that you are going to have to lead us through more difficult passages, perhaps than any president before you. We've never been in a period when our idea and existence is under assault in quite the same way. And instinctively, perhaps, the rest of us understand that that means that it should lead us, even as the spirit of free inquiry continues to be our guide, towards really unprecedented unity among ourselves. We need faculty, staff, and students to have your back in the time ahead. I'll just say that again. Our job, I think, going forward in this difficult time is to have your back as you lead us through this world. The last part of our challenging moment lies within the remit of this panel. And I will just note as we begin that we should do so with the events of this week in our mind. On Tuesday in Vietnam, we had what may be the largest rainstorm in human history. We got 5 feet of rain in a 24-hour period. An unimaginable amount of rain, the kind you can only have on a globally warmed world where a warm atmosphere holds more water vapor. Just to remind us that history never goes away, one of the things that rain did was apparently dislodge lots of landmines and munitions left over from the war to wash down into places where people now have to deal with them. Later that same day, Hurricane Melissa crashed into Jamaica with the highest wind speeds ever recorded in such a storm. One instrument dropped into its roiling chaos from a research aircraft found wind speeds of 252 miles per hour. That's what happens when you heat the oceans, fueling these great storms. We have no idea yet how many lives were lost there because communications haven't been restored to the hardest hit areas. But we got this morning the first indications of damage from the insurance industry in Jamaica, which set the cost at between 30% and 250% of the island's annual GDP. At the lowest end of that estimate, that would be the equivalent of a $9 trillion loss in the US. What I'm trying to say is that we live on an increasingly untenable world, and it is our job to make sense of it and to do something about it. And the most salient fact about that job is that unlike most of the other questions that we deal with, which at some level are timeless, and we've been talking about the great span of human existence from Aristotle on forward for the last 2 hours, this one comes with a time limit. It may be only you and maybe the next president after you that actually are at Middlebury at a time when this remains a live and open question, because past a certain point, our ability to deal with it becomes, once the Arctic is melted, we lack a plan to freeze it back up again. So that set of limits, restraints, very much, I think, informs some of our discussion here, which I know is going to be deep and rich. We'll begin with John Isham, who's a professor of economics and of environmental studies, an important combination, talking on pragmatism, patience, and love. Jonathan Cummings, a research scholar here among us, talking about responsible decision-making, decision science here at Middlebury. Our beloved colleague Minna Brown, who directs the Climate Action Program, talking about from theater to geology to advocacy, empowering climate action pathways. And Kurt Gervich, who directs the School of the Environment, how to fulfill your responsibility to the planet through local action and community building. John, over to you.
I echo Bill. What a remarkable 2 hours we just had thinking about the liberal arts. Seriously, I mean, it's tempting to say, should we have an inauguration of a new president every year? Is that what it would take? I hope not, Ian. I'm just saying. And as we talk about presidents, what a joy to welcome back President John McArdle and Bonnie McArdle. How great to have you here. And I'll say, looking at the audience, I'm just thrilled, as Bill said, to have you all here. I see faculty colleagues who led us in conversation about the liberal arts. James, Mary Beth, that was amazing. I see two faculty colleagues up front, Maria and Pavlos, who every time I hear them speak, I learn something deeply. And I'm so appreciative of them. I see staff colleagues, Heather, and community colleagues, Greg, among many. It's just a joy to be here. Leading through action and connection, climate responsibility as liberal arts practice. I believe that three Americans, true beacons, can help us to think about leading through action and connection in our time of climate crisis. First, Vermonter John Dewey. In the Metaphysical Club, Louis Menand tells us that Dewey, William James, and other leading thinkers of their day had an idea about ideas. Their pragmatism boils down to this: the ideas that matter are the ideas that work. Here are Dewey's ideas about education, about what works. In My Pedagogic Creed, he writes, I believe that education is the fundamental method of social progress and reform. I believe that every teacher should realize the dignity of his calling, that he is a social servant. I believe that in this way, the teacher always is the prophet of the true God and the usherer in of the true kingdom of God. Dewey's views on education overlapped with his beliefs about democracy and civic engagement, another focus of our inaugural weekend. In The Ethics of Democracy, he writes, "Democracy and the one, the ultimate, ethical ideal of humanity are, to my mind, synonyms. The idea of democracy, the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity represent a society in which the distinction between spiritual and the secular has ceased. Ushering in the true kingdom of God, no distinction between spiritual and the secular. I believe that Dewey's spiritual liberal arts can join hand in hand with Middlebury's secular liberal arts. And I hope that's a conversation we can have. Next, Ella Baker, invaluable elder for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a teacher unlike any other. From Barbara Ransby's Ella Baker and the Black Freedom Movement, a radical democratic vision, we learn how Baker honored the young people whom she mentored. In SNCC's signature marathon meetings, she opened up time and space for young people to hash out disagreements, to craft tactics, and to begin to envision their own conception of the beloved community. The ultimate guide on the side, Baker understood that to teach was to listen deeply, to walk alongside. And Baker was tough. SNCC volunteer Mary King is quoted by the University of New Mexico's Stephen Preskill as having felt intimidated by Baker's Socratic methods. But she soon saw that Baker's questioning was a strategy to combat dogmatism. King attributed to Baker one of the most important lessons of her life. There are many legitimate and effective avenues for social change. There is no single right way. And then there's Reverend James Lawson, a contemporary and colleague of Baker. His belief in agape, in putting that transcendent form of love into action, was the foundation for his teaching of the young leaders of SNCC, whom Baker would guide a few years later. In the late 1950s, in the basement of his Nashville church, Lawson invited local college students, most of them African American, to meet regularly and have discussions about how to affect social change. These were young adults who saw injustice all around them, the crises of their time, and they had experienced this injustice, and they wanted to do something about it. In Walking with the Wind, John Lewis writes, "The man was a born teacher. We learned about Reinhold Niebuhr and his philosophy of nonviolent revolution. We read Thoreau. We studied ancient Chinese thinkers like Moti and Lao Tzu. We discussed and debated every aspect of Gandhi's principles. These were incredibly powerful ideas, and their beauty was that they applied to real life, to the specifics of the world we lived in. In teaching to live, Black religion, activists, educators, and radical social change, a new book from Oxford University Press, Almeda Wright enumerates Lawson's teaching tenets. 1, meditation and prayer. 2, study scriptures, that is, the texts that were central to his work. 3, begin with personal relationships in the home, the church, and the community. And 4, experiment with practice. In that time and place, that meant nonviolent resistance. It strikes me that these 4, only slightly modified, are an ideal cheat sheet for our educators today. Start with meditation, start with silence and quiet, and yes, maybe there's even a place at a secular school like Middlebury for prayer. And I agree with Jonathan Miller Lane from the previous panel, meditation on what it is to be human is a North Star of all of this. Then, study books. Read texts, learn from the written word, and then connect. Only connect, William Cronin suggests. Connect with your fellow students, the staff on the campus, community members. Listen deeply to them. Walk alongside. And finally, experiment with action. Action designed to liberate the self and those around us. Mystic chords do stretch from Dewey and the pragmatists to Baker and Lawson and other leaders of the Black freedom movement. Over the years, I've come to shape my teaching in large part around their collective vision, alongside my students in classes that include the scientific and institutional challenges of going carbon neutral, building the new climate movement, fighting for justice, love in action, and this fall, our community-engaged practicum, in which we're reading Bill's fabulous new book, Here Comes the Sun, and students are working with 4 community partners on accelerating the clean energy revolution. And I'm proud to do that alongside another wonderful member of our audience, Diane Monroe, a leader every semester of that effort. Now, as we inaugurate a new president, I believe that Dewey's pragmatism, Baker's patient guidance, and Lawson's embrace of love can coalesce into education for our time. Liberal arts education, education that at its best liberates. Woven together, their vision is one way for Middlebury to step into our new climate responsibility, into all of our responsibilities in these challenging times. Times that are full of heartbreak and hope, of pessimism and optimism in just about equal measure. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Jonathan Cummings. I'm a new scholar in residence here. And I want to add about 30 seconds, apologies, to my opening, but having experienced the earlier presentations, I really want to take a moment to observe and honor those. I already knew Middlebury was a remarkable place and an important place, but experience today, it's been really an emotional and moving experience. So it's made it even more of an honor to be here today and part of these panels, and convinced me more of the relevance and importance of my message. And I believe I offer a bit of a how to a question that was addressed earlier today. So I'm a biologist and a risk analyst with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where I assess species status to support implementation of the Endangered Species Act. But I am also, and I think more importantly, a practitioner of structured decision making. And I think we all need to become practitioners of structured decision making. Let me explain why. There are only 2 forces in this world that determine the outcomes of our lives, just 2 forces. One is luck, chance, random events, the things we can't control. Grant me the wisdom to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The second force is the decisions we make. That's the difference. That is what we control. Raise your hand if you've ever been trained in how to make rational decisions. Look around you. I see maybe 4 hands of this audience. I think that's tragic. That's a lot of power to actively control our fate that we're leaving to chance. Okay, maybe you're right, that's a little overly critical. I'm sure many of you are great decision makers. But in fact, due to evolution, most of us are innately good decision makers. But are we though? Context matters. Did humanity evolve to make decisions in complex, hierarchical institutions with complicated feedback systems and limited opportunity to learn from prior decisions? Sure, we evolved to decide how and whether to fight, flight, flee, or fawn. But we have many cognitive biases that limit our ability to make innately well-reasoned decisions. When faced with situations that stress our innate means of decision-making, there are 2 things we can do to make us better. We can practice through repetition and observation of outcomes, or we can use the application of decision science. Many challenges we face, from towns, 1,000-year floods becoming repeated annual events, colleges and universities, declining enrollment, funding cuts, AI, to our planet, climate change, globalization, biodiversity loss, remote warfare. These challenges don't afford us the time or luxury to learn through trial and error all around, and you may only get one opportunity to find out. So please, let's do better. Thankfully, there's a 300-plus-year-old science to making well-reasoned rational decisions. The process itself isn't actually all that complicated. It's just that decisions themselves can make those challenges sometimes arise. So here we go. It's 5 relatively easy steps, each completed separately and then combined, thus the structure and structured decision-making. And get them all right, if nothing else, at least why a decision was made should make more sense. So 1, what's wrong? 2, what do you want? 3, what can you do? 4, if you do, what happens? And 5, so what matters? 1, what's wrong? Or I like to put a more positive and proactive spin on this and ask, what is the decision opportunity that you're facing? For example, how can Middlebury become a beacon for effectively addressing the educational and societal challenges of our times? Or what policies and actions should we, the people of Earth, adopt to sustainably live both now and into the future? 2, what do you want? What are your values, your goals, your objectives, your metrics? What is it you care about, and what criteria determine how well you achieve and feel about that outcome? For example, how many students graduate, how successful their careers are, how happy they are with their lives, what contributions do they make to their fields, their communities, their nation? Or what's the change in climate from historical recent baseline? The rate and change in climate, the mitigation costs, the mitigation benefits, the distribution of those costs and benefits, the things that you value and care about and how you measure them. 3, what can we do? What alternative actions, strategies, combinations of tasks, allocation of resources, disbursement of funds, et cetera, are available to us? For example, what programs, courses, and electives will be part of the curriculum? What students will be accepted? What postgraduate support is provided? Or what part per million target will be adopted? What regulations will be implemented? What subsidies or incentives will be developed? What can be done? 4, what will happen? This is where science most directly plays in to predict the consequences of actions. For example, if action A is taken, what will the result of that be for what you want for each metric? Repeat this for all other actions. It's important to note that predictions, that science, comes in after the values and options have been identified and helps identify what is best given those. But in their absence, data is just data, not a decision. 5, so what matters? And this is where the rubber really meets the road. Rather than just a list of pros and cons, it's important to know how much you care about the pros and cons and how likely they are to occur. So the final step is to assign a relative importance and a likelihood of achievement to each of the things you value to determine the collective value of your action. The rational choice is in the action or set of actions that provide the best collective achievement of your values. Maybe you're saying to yourself, duh, of course we should pick the option that provides the best outcome. Great, I agree. However, when was the last time you actually clearly figured out what option that was? When was the last time you documented that so that others could understand the decision, could understand why it was made, and learn from that decision for future decisions? And more importantly, if we, the experts in our field in this room, aren't doing that, we're teaching others to do it, are we training students and ourselves well to face our future? If we're not, I don't think we are, but I think we can. There are institutions where decision science programs and curriculum are being offered, and Middlebury is an excellent place to add such a program. Decision science is the liberal arts science. It builds on economics, psychology, sociology, physics, statistics, environmental studies, and whatever fields are relevant to the decision at hand. Middlebury has experience in all of these fields, and it has students that want to bring a variety of studies together. Nothing brings interdisciplinary knowledge and skills together more completely or more influentially than decision science. Please help us help each other and bring decision science to the Middlebury community. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Happy Halloween. Good to see you all out here. So I've been thinking a lot about what leadership means lately, in times when it's easier to sit back and see how things will play out, in times when we feel powerless, in times when there are too many things to care about, when it feels like the ground is crumbling, and when fear is driving many people's actions and leadership. I've also been thinking a lot about awe, about what it means that we have evolved to live here on this singular, gorgeous planet. Awe of bodies and consciousness and plants and science and systems. Awe of community and resilience and grief and joy. And I've been thinking about us here at Middlebury, about this community and physical space that we all get to come home to for 4 or 10 or 25 years, about how this place has been a starting point and gathering space for so much leadership, so much curiosity, and so much empathy. About why I leapt at the chance to come back 5 years ago. When I was a student here in the early 2000s, the leadership of many here today, with Bill and John and many more, helped me to understand that I had a place and responsibility in tackling climate change. I didn't really have that before coming to school here. Classes, internships, conferences, and most of all, the student community helped me to tease out my skills and passions and values. And that does not mean that the intervening years things have felt clear or that I knew exactly where that was going, but I did feel like I had a direction, a motivation, and a community that I could lean on for that. And I know that that's been the case for so many others. So while I'm going to speak for a few minutes on some of the things that I think are important for us to celebrate and to grapple with and to aspire to here in Middlebury, I'm most interested in the conversation that we can all have together about how we shape our futures. So for me, when I think about leadership, awe, and community, I think of how this school has and can step into collective and individual responsibilities. I think of how real it is for us to affirm commitments to divestment, local renewable energy, conservation, and educational engagement through Energy 2028, which is no small feat. How this place brought together history and environmental studies and gender and econ majors to build one of the most important climate organizations in history with 350.org. How our students keep clarifying the needs of the current moment, whether through divestment or carbon neutrality or justice. How partnerships with architecture and facilities and the Sustainability Solutions Lab are helping to reimagine planning with the Living Building Challenge. How the Knoll offers space for real exploration of food as a medium to cultivate well-being in people, place, and the planet. How amazing it is that our second largest major here at Middlebury is environmental studies that allows students to experience deep interdisciplinarity. How classes from Italian to art to hydrology weave in climate threads in real ways, sometimes when it's less obvious, but no less vital. How our climate action fellows use a full year of compensated time, community, and mentoring to layer on their lens on climate work, from food to frankincense to technology to financial systems. How our career and experiential learning partners, not to mention dozens of other groups on campus, find ways to make sure that sustainability and climate action paths are always offered. How our alumni raise their hands immediately when asked to help students and other alumni navigating their climate paths. We can look at our past and our present and see so much incredible work, so much that it can be overwhelming. I know that's the case for many. But for me, that complexity and that diversity of paths is a strength. So much good happens here. And we don't always get it right. I mean, that's the truth, right? That's what this place is about too. But I hope that as we move forward, we can strategically take on our roles in climate leadership with accountability, transparency, and a lot of joy. Because we're in a moment that demands it. Not only are we seeing the dismantling of climate and social infrastructure at the federal level, we're seeing other schools and organizations back off on their climate efforts, including billionaires like yesterday. That's even as the economic case for clean energy grows clear and we cross tipping points. When we think about our roles in college, town, and planetary climate leadership, those needs are not going away. Our students and community members care deeply and need to have ways to find meaning in their studies and their actions. So as a school that does prioritize this work, When we think about leadership and community and awe, where could we go? Where might our responsibilities and opportunities lie? So I don't have all the answers, but from my work with students, faculty, staff, alumni, community members, and the broader climate community, some things that I think we could include, and should include maybe, are continuing to acknowledge the importance and interrelatedness of climate action. That is a bare minimum, but it is not, at this point, something that feels too far, it's something that I worry about. Like, how can we make sure, and seeing President Bauckham prioritize this as one of the two main focuses of today is so heartening for me. But I also think that we need to be thinking about how we make sure that no student leaves Middlebury without exposure to climate engagement. I mean, this is the world that we are entering into that is here already. We can't put a blind eye to that as our students are here. How can we cultivate and support student needs in action? How can we also support faculty and staff in their leadership so they feel connected? How can we learn from and share with our alumni? How can we encourage the decisions our community members make, from the plays they write, to the maps they make, to the decisions they make about their investments in the C-suite? How do we prioritize continued investment in leading edge infrastructure like geothermal networks and systems that don't rely on burning anything? How can we coordinate with humility and commitment with our own town, state, and institutions on what it means to be resilient and integrated in a time when climate change is here and we're seeing the impacts? How can we connect the dots? How can we touch the ground? How can we work with complicated, nuanced, imperfect solutions? How can we try, fail, learn, and iterate? I don't pretend to know exactly where we're going. The tangle of aspirations and constraints are real and here on campus. But I do know that all of us have a role to play. The main thing that I think we can do together is to dive deep while staying interconnected, which is what the liberal arts are all about. If we take our mission seriously of our commitment to immersive learning, through which we prepare students to lead engaged, consequential, and creative lives, contribute to their communities, and address the world's most challenging problems, then climate change is at the crux of the promise of a liberal arts, but specifically a Middlebury liberal arts education. So I hope that we think of opportunity and responsibility together, of building toward the world we want to live in. No matter what, this is about each of us, with our joys and superpowers and contexts, affirming that this is a place where imagining a thriving future for all of us is possible. And we'll be keeping this conversation going in 2 weeks during the What Works Now conference here on campus, honoring where leadership has come from and can come from in the future. So I hope you'll join us. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kurt Gervich. I'm the director of the Middlebury School of the Environment. It's so nice to see you all, and so many of you came in costume. That's great. Thanks. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. I want you to picture your favorite place. And now ask yourself, whose stories matter here? What forces shape this place? Some of them might even be invisible, like laws, or culture, or tiny molecules. Now imagine that your goal is to improve the environmental future of this place. What skills do you need? Science? Persuasion? Collaboration? You may open your eyes. This is systems thinking. It's seeing the web that connects the social to the ecological. It's spotting cause and effect relationships, feedback loops, and patterns, finding those leverage points where small actions ripple into big change and where your actions can begin to shape the system for positive outcomes. I believe that it's the role of higher education to nurture within us the tools to reveal systems. I know the phrase social ecological systems theory might sound like something cooked up in a corporate boardroom by people who have never touched dirt or made eye contact. But stick with me, because once you get the idea, it changes how we see the world. Social ecological systems means that humans and nature are not separate. We're all tangled up together: cities, forests, policies, protests, soil microbes, supply chains, all connected. Change one piece, the whole thing shifts. I know that working for positive environmental change is often overwhelming. The problems seem huge, and it's impossible to get a toehold to start the climb. But the social ecological systems lens cuts through the fog. Through this lens, you can see that we're all connected because we're all embedded in this giant, messy human nature system. And if you're in the system, then you're in the game, and you have a role to play. The social ecological systems lens can help you see your place, and from there, you can move from passive to powerful. This is the work we do at the Middlebury School of the Environment. We experience social ecological systems of all sorts, untangle their complexity, learn the stories of the people and critters embedded in them, and work to develop the leadership skills that help us work for positive change. There are some important points I want to make about how understanding social ecological systems can help you in your quest for positive environmental change. And I believe it's the role of higher education to help us get there. As environmentalists, when we feel defeated, we like to say the system is broken. But the system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is the people who designed it had different goals and more influence than most of us. Consequently, we're living in their system and getting a raw deal for our efforts. But social ecological systems lens can help us get perspective. It means looking upstream to ask, what are the behavioral and economic patterns that perpetuate environmental degradation? Who wins and who loses as a result, and what political dynamics are incentivizing these cycles? Asking questions like these helps us to identify the structures that generate power imbalances and enables us to see the leverage points to disable them. It's like sticking a plunger in the right part of a clogged toilet, and suddenly the whole system starts flowing again. At the Middlebury School of the Environment, we have a motto: lead with heart and meaning. College isn't just about lab reports, research papers, and grades. It's the rare space where you can experiment, try, fail, and try again without serious consequences. We only learn at the edge of our knowledge, and sometimes when we're at the edge, we fall off. Don't go about your work as if it counts for nothing. Go about your work as if it counts for everything. Middlebury College and higher education more generally give you time, resources, and community. So students, I want you to use this place, its money, its influence, its people, and its mic to make an impact. Maybe make your next assignment a podcast about climate justice. Map the systems as you see them, share your perspective, promote your ideas, put them out there online, on your social media, on your Substack, or an RSS feed. Your work doesn't have to be perfect. No one's work is, it just has to be real. That's how systems change, one messy, imperfect step at a time. Leading with heart and meaning means acting with intention. In this case, shifting your thinking to transform classroom assignments into the activation of the leverage points that come with the price of tuition. Understanding social ecological systems also helps build resilience. That's resilience in ecosystems and in yourself. Resilience means absorbing shocks and adapting to change. Climate change is here. We can't undo all of it, but we can build communities that bend without breaking. That means restoring wetlands and cultivating regenerative farms, but also building strong community ties, responsive leadership, and mutual aid. And by doing this work, you also build your own resilience. You learn to face uncertainty, collaborate, and adapt. You learn to see adversity and ambiguity as adventure. Here's some good news. You don't need a PhD or a seat at the UN to do this work, because the easiest systems to tackle and your biggest opportunity for impact is local. All you need is curiosity to observe the systems around you, intention to push on the right leverage points, and grit to keep going. If you're looking for a leverage point, try this. The town of Middlebury is currently developing a 30-year plan that will shape everything in the community, from economic growth and housing to energy, land use, and natural resources. Typically, planning processes like these are preferential to real estate developers and land speculators. But you can help make Middlebury's plan different. The town is asking for input from concerned residents, including students. Connections between Middlebury College and the town are one of the major items still to be discussed. The next Planning Commission meetings are November 6th and November 20th at City Hall. Show up, speak truth to power, make climate resilience part of Middlebury's plan. We started with our eyes closed in darkness. Understanding this beautiful, tangled web of people and planet gives us more than knowledge. It gives us vision, a way of looking at the world that doesn't separate humans from ecosystems, but sees us as co-creators in the systems we inhabit. So remember, use the social ecological systems lens to get perspective, act locally, build your resilience, and lead with heart and meaning. It won't shield you from the coming flood, but it will teach you how to stand in it.
Well, with the acute awareness that this is all that stands between you and trick-or-treating, I'm going to just propose one question to go down the line here and maybe give people a chance in the answering it to react a little bit to what others were saying. The word that keeps coming to my mind now is resilience. Look, we're far into the climate story now. We're already feeling its effects. We're feeling them physically, and Kurt was, alluding to that a little bit, even in, as the town begins to figure out how to deal with what comes at it when it rains and so on, or doesn't. But we're also feeling it in our hearts and minds. The incidence of kind of climate despair and climate anxiety is actually very real, not just a thing we talk about, but something that increasing number of people, young and old, feel as we go through this. So I think that we need, even as we try to figure out what we can do to prevent things from getting to the worst place that they can get, we need to figure out a little bit about how to acknowledge and deal with the fact that this is already upon us. So maybe we could just go down the line, starting with you, John, and just offer a few thoughts about that before we head out the door into the big world.
Thanks, Bill. I'll return to what I've been struggling with in a good way, which is the place of the spiritual in our secular liberal arts. My oldest friend in life, Reverend Sam Spears, led a set of conversations at Vassar 15, 20 years ago called The Varieties of the Secular Experience, playing off of William James. And the thesis was that places like Vassar and Middlebury have chapels in the middle, and they are no longer the central place by any means, except through the geography. And those good folk, led by Sam and others, I think are asking a good question. What is the place for all of that? And as you said, despair, one place we turn to is good books. I was delighted to hear Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer earlier, and that's a good place to start. But I think that it's worth asking ourselves, how do we put prayer, and I'm no huge practitioner, I admit, how do we put spiritual, how do we go back to the reason that Middlebury started, which was to train people to lead in this very way? I think we need that, and I'll finish with what I've learned from dear colleagues, and to which I alluded earlier, the power of meditation and silence in our classes. I start all my classes, even, yes, intro, micro, with meditation. And it's true, well before we get to supply and demand. But I've learned that from Mark Lappin, who's in environmental studies, from Becky Gould, from Mark Orton, our Dean of Spiritual and Religious Life, and many others. And to me, Melissa Hammerly, many folks are doing this, and that strikes me as a bit of a tonic, not to eliminate despair, but to allow us to sit with it, and take one day at a time.
Thanks for the question, Bill. It's one that I'm probably going to ramble a bit on because I think about it on a daily basis and therefore don't have an answer to exactly. But I guess I'll offer a few things as I think a comment that was made earlier today resonates with me of intellectual pessimism, I guess, but willful optimism, not exactly the way it was said, but along those lines. And I think that describes my view of things, I suppose. Like I'm an intuitive pessimist, I guess, but also an intuitive, that's a reason to keep working kind of person. I guess the reflections that I have, my closest friend is a regional planner in Lamoille County, Vermont. And when I referenced those 1,000-year floods becoming annual events, watching him struggle with having to deal with that, and how our country is failing to deal with that, and how FEMA is not giving money to Vermont, and there are people out on the streets, that's the side of things that I guess gives me pessimism. But the side of things that gives me optimism is that he is there, he is observing it, he is working on it, and he is making it better. And there are more and more people, I think, despite our struggle with wanting to talk about politics right now, that are talking about it and are seeing it. And I think more people are showing up all the time. So that's one side of things where I'm optimistic. The other side where I'm optimistic, tying back to my decision science side of things, while I pointed out that very few people are trained in it, people do understand its value. And even those in power that aren't trained in it, when they have the opportunity and take the time to go through it, the power I've seen at the end of some of those processes where people get it and have worked together and worked to solve other people's problems where they started disagreeing about what each other's objectives are is powerful. And I think people want that and agree about a lot more than we think we do. And if you give them the place to do it, that will get better.
So think about this a lot. One piece is that I think there's place for I think that we sometimes pathologize the despair or the anxiety more than we need to, because as I think many great thinkers recognize, faced with the kind of challenges that we are, it's adaptive, it's realistic to look at these scenarios and say, oh, and so I'm not saying that that's where you want to live all the time, but I do think that the more that we say that's wrong and that we should just live in, joy all the time, like that's discounting the importance of being in the spaces. So I'm not particularly one for prayer. Recognize the value there. But I do think that recognition and validation of where people are coming into these spaces is incredibly important. But I also think that translating that into a space of community and action is that's the answer to me, and knowing that that's not linear necessarily. We had Sarah Jaquette Ray here as a part of the Clifford Symposium a couple years ago in her work on climate anxiety, as there's much more emerging now. But I think this sense of nonlinearity and of recognizing that it's okay for us to feel in this is really important. But I do think that a sense of of less of a sense of I have to do all of it, but more that we get to do lots of it, is really, really where I start from. And we have done pilots of the climate wayfinding program through the All We Can Save project here, and this kind of thinking that comes out of also Ayanna Johnson's climate Venn diagram, which is a very simple tool of, what are my passions, what are my skills, and what are the needs, right? The climate wayfinding program goes more in depth in a lot of that. Those kinds of opportunities, I think, are where I see the most benefit and acknowledgement.
Wow, okay. I think I lost a little bit of track of the question, but I do have an answer for whatever the question is. I'll just answer the question I want it to be. I see, every place is a microcosm of the biggest problems facing the planet, right? We can see evidence of climate change and hunger and poverty and inequality and in every place that we go and travel to and live. To me, what helps me think about resilience is then that also every place is a little experiment that contributes to solving those problems. So I see the problems as global and scaling down, and the solutions as local and scaling up. And again, I don't remember quite what the question was, but I would just offer that as a kind of mechanism for thinking about, when you feel despair, to think in that way, that this place is a microcosm of problems, but it also gives you a chance to experiment with solutions.
Very good answers all around, and I think very good answers all around, and I think we can leave 3 hours later confident that in a difficult and unsettled world, this community here remains a place of a center of gravity that we can count on, and I'm extremely grateful for that and for all of you.
Nice.